Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Batman Gargoyle of Gotham, issue number 2. If you didn't see the first video, go ahead and check it out here. So this issue opens up with someone in their own personal library or study or whatever you want to call it, before being intruded upon by what looks to be the serial killer that was hinted in the first issue. As you can see here, this person has very large claws, talons, whatever you want to call them, which is probably why they couldn't identify what weapon they were using. We then catch up with Jim Gordon as he's talking to the director of Arkham Asylum right after his little interview with one of the inmates, and they're basically talking about this missing Dr. Quentin that's relating to the case, saying that he went missing 20 years ago after the children's ward of Arkham was closed off, basically talking about how much Gotham has changed and gotten worse. And in the middle of this conversation, Gordon gets a call from Batman saying, "The criminal that your officers took from me is part of something worse. He ran a clandestine TNT laboratory in the mansion that exploded over in the industrial zone. The TNT was produced on a large scale by enslaved beggars. There's sure to be more where that came from." We then jump to a little protest, a little rally where Nia is at, and from the looks of it, they are protesting outside of Wayne Enterprises, Wayne Industry. I don't know which one it is in this story. Like we're seeing a lot nowadays, protesting the rich in general. You can see signs that say silence is violence, speak up for them, you know, basically in regards to all the homeless people that are being killed and taken and enslaved like we saw in the first issue. We see Nia speaking to the people, kind of becoming an icon of her own, you know, on social media, just really being a vocal activist, really calling out the rich, saying this is all growing to unimaginable proportions really fast, but this is a serious matter, and if you came all this way to post pictures, holding signs, to feel like heroes, I kindly ask you to get the hell out of here. There are no heroes, only victims in Gotham City. And I feel like that's the sign of a true activist, because so many people nowadays want to be a social media activist for social points, not actually for change. So it's cool to see a character that's not just, you know, posturing, not just doing it for clout. You can tell she's just completely serious about the betterment of the city as a whole. We then get this really dark, gloomy look at Bruce Wayne underwater, broken and bloody and bruised, saying, "So that's how it feels." He flashes back on his confrontation with Krytoon on the bridge, saying, "Forgive me, Mother. I lost control, but I won't let the guilt get in the way. I will make the violence my rite of passage by changing its meaning." We then get a little look at the aftermath where it looks like Krytoon was basically making one last attempt to try and get away before Batman just let loose on him, just started beating him to a pulp, kind of getting revenge on him for swinging that hammer on him so much. But you can tell this Batman is just a little bit more unhinged. There's an edge to him in an unhealthy way. "Each blow," he says, "becomes a stab at the child inside me until he dies." And it's at this point that even the woman that Krytoon took hostage is freaking out and crying and screaming because of what Batman's doing. So that just tells you how far he's going. The GCPD pull up and whip out their guns. Batman, literally looking like a demon, looks back at them and thinks, "I'll be complete." And for a moment he sits there and realizes, "But when he's gone, I'll forget you, Mother. This will be my most wrenching sacrifice." We then catch up with Krytoon in custody saying, "I'm pleased to meet you, but I'm not the killer you're looking for. You offend me by giving me credit for such unimaginative work." We can see that he's being questioned by Jim Gordon, who says, "Listen, evidence from the investigation into the recent murders has led me to you, and you're connected to the industrial zone explosion, where 12 bodies were found." Krytoon then gives out a line from the cartoon, "Don't try this at home." Gordon doubles down, "What do you have to do with the murders?" Krytoon says, "You know that need to find out what it's like to rip someone's heart out through their mouth." Gordon then starts to flip out. "Don't play crazy, you cretin. You ran a clandestine TNT laboratory in that mansion and enslaved homeless people to manufacture it. We know that TNT was produced on a large scale, so start talking and tell me where all those explosives ended up." And basically just taking Batman completely at his word and using it for the investigation. We then see all the cops outside listening to everything he's saying, not knowing that he got his information from Batman. Remember, none of these cops agree with what Batman is doing except Jim Gordon. One of the guys says, "What lab? Where is he getting this?" Krytoon continues, "Don't try this at home," the good ones say after teaching you how to do bad things. "Isn't that the height of hypocrisy? Why isn't the masked torturer being interrogated in my place? I don't mask my evil, and my soul hurts. I'd also like to look in a mirror and not see my own reflection. Then I could be one of you, a good one." Basically calling out the hypocrisy of, like, how are you gonna hold Batman up to this pedestal and use the information that he's giving you to interrogate me, because he knows that Batman was the only one there. So if Jim Gordon knows that he's connected to the explosives, he knows that he's getting it from the only person that saw him there, right? So he's calling out, why are you not investigating Batman, who has the mask and who's hiding from his own actions, doesn't have to look in the mirror mirror to see his own reflection. You know, how is he the good guy and I'm the bad one? Yet, according to the law, his actions are just as illegal as mine. We then jump back to Bruce in the Batcave crawling out of the pool that he was laying in. Alfred hands him a towel and says, "I thought you might want to know what's going on outside the Wayne Enterprises tower, sir." And they watch as Nia gives her speech about the rich and the hunger of the homeless, and again, how they're not doing anything, saying, "The rich need to understand that we must interrogate their role in society." Alfred looks to Bruce and says, "Looks like she's trying to start a conversation with you, sir." Bruce says, "This is bullshit. They have no idea of the real threat to this city." He's so disconnected with this version of his own self, him as Bruce Wayne. He's only thinking of himself as Batman. He only cares about vengeance and the mission and stopping the serial killers who are running rampant. So he sees the wealth disparity as a non-issue, and he sees only the villains that he's going after as part of the problem, when in reality it's a little bit of both. We then see Jim Gordon being questioned by the commissioner, who's asking, "Where did you find the evidence of the suspect being involved with the mansion explosion?" Gordon says, "I'll make a formal report about the whole investigation. I have found 2 specific patients that are most likely to be killed next, and they're within the killer's established perimeter. So I want to request a task force." The commissioner starts going off. "I cannot stop the entire department based on your assumptions, Gordon, but I'll make whatever staff I'm able to share with you available. Now let's talk about where you found evidence of a clandestine explosive laboratory. I know you don't respect me because of my age or because I'm the mayor's nephew, but the fact is I'm the one who cleans up after the you pull. Do I need to refresh your memory? You are not allowed to keep that vigilante up to date on investigations, nor receive information from him." Basically calling him out, like, "I know where you're getting this stuff. He helped us when he appeared 2 years ago, sure, but he's getting out of control. The mansion explosion, torturing a suspect. The police cannot be condoning the actions of a criminal. My own men are accusing me of turning a blind eye to Batman, saying that if they could play by their own rules, Batman wouldn't make that much of a difference. If you cross that line again, I will go after him, and I'll make sure you're indicted as his accomplice." Which is pretty cool because, you know, this is something that we see pointed out a lot, but he's kind of, you know, pointing out that a lot of the officers are identifying with exactly what Krytoon pointed out, right? And honestly, I kind of agree with, because Batman literally is a criminal. It always has been kind of hypocritical. He is a hero, he's trying to do good things, but, you know, the destruction that superheroes lay out has always been a point of critique, and it's applicable. So it's cool to see that playing into the story a little bit here too. We then jump to a church where we see a lot of scattered people in the pews, but very specifically we see a woman with white hair in a red coat holding a cross with the hood over her head. As we get a closer look at her, we see red eyes and red lines kind of pointing towards her mouth, and we see the father at the stand kind of notice how out of place she looks, ask the other guy on stage to continue the mass for him, as it looks like he's about to go take care of a lot of moths, I think, just crowded around this statue in the church. And as this other guy finishes the mass for him, he says, "The father would like everyone to rise for the final prayers." And as everyone else in the church stands, we see this hooded woman drop her crucifix and seemingly notice one of the guys in the stands, one of the guys with this mustache. She follows him and his wife, it looks like, out of the church, down the street to their apartment in a very, very creepy way. We then see officers pull up to this very old, very haunted looking house, responding to a report, basically asking them to check out one of the houses of one of the potential victims that Gordon pointed out to the commissioner. So they're basically checking on this for him. And then we soon realize it is the house with the study of the man who was going to be killed by this supposed serial killer at the very start of the issue. They see how mauled and pierced and bloody he is. We then catch up with Jim Gordon at Wayne Manor, basically just trying to get a meeting with Bruce Wayne. Alfred keeps stalling, likely because Bruce doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne anymore. Gordon basically admits, of the 2 people that he thinks are going to be the next victims of this serial killer, that we had the one that was already killed, and then we had the other who is apparently Bruce Wayne. You know, because this serial killer is going after other patients that were in Arkham Asylum's children's wing, this means that Bruce Wayne at some point was in Arkham Asylum as a child. Alfred then says, "Master Bruce's treatment in Arkham was very short-lived, and I haven't heard the name Dr. Quentin in a long time," basically denying that he's in any danger. Bruce then looks at the screen as he's been listening to this whole conversation, saying, "What the hell are they talking about?" Jim then exits saying, "Well, let me know when your boss's schedule clears up. I'd prefer to hear his own opinion on what I came to offer," and then drives away before Bruce appears saying, "Alfred?" Alfred then starts explaining, I'm confused but not surprised that you don't remember being treated at Arkham, to which Bruce says, why have you never mentioned this to me, Alfred? Alfred says, at the time I was given direct instructions by your specialist to never bring up the subject because it might trigger another outburst of violence. To this, Bruce says, which outburst of violence are you talking about that you're trying to prevent again by not bringing it up? Alfred says, what do you remember about the night your parents were murdered? Bruce then goes through the whole thing. We went to the movies, downtown alley, parents bleeding, blah blah blah, we all know it. But then, he says, then this strange vision always comes to mind, a demon cub with a broken wing. Alfred says, Dr. Quentin probably altered your real memories during the treatment. For you, that night ends with the murder of your parents, but what happened next was nearly as brutal. You were in shock. I wanted to take you home, but then, like a ghost, you disappeared. The police and I looked down every dark alley for you for hours. And then we found you. And we see him absolutely beating on this seemingly homeless man, screaming and crying and hitting him until he's bleeding. And then we see the baton that he's hitting him with, and it says Sergeant Gordon. So he lifted that off of him and then used it. Alfred says, you thought you went after your parents' killer, but ended up beating a random homeless man until he was paralyzed. Dr. Quentin offered help and his treatment seemed effective until Batman came along. Bruce then says, Alfred, I need the truth. How could you hide this from me? And why have you never questioned the idea of Batman? Alfred says, I couldn't stand to see you take on even more guilt on top of what you were already carrying, and Batman at least brought some meaning to our lives. Bruce says, our lives? And Alfred says, you weren't the only one who lost loved ones that day, and I believed that a purpose, however absurd it may be, would keep me from losing you too. But I was wrong. Bruce says, Bruce Wayne is my weakness, Alfred, but how can I erase his memories if I don't even know what they are? Alfred then points out the irony. Have you reflected on the patterns you're repeating right now? Dr. Quentin erased your memories, and now you're trying to do the same. Bruce thinks for a moment and then says, Alfred, what if Batman wasn't even my idea? To which he answers, I think that answer lies in finding out who Bruce Wayne really is. We then go back to this church where the preacher is sitting in a confessional with a man in a hood, holding one of the moths on his finger, saying, she came to see me. The hooded man says, don't worry, we can, and then he gets cut off. The preacher says, no, I'm waiting for her. We then jump with Bruce and Alfred to Arkham Asylum as they're talking to the homeless man that Bruce paralyzed as a kid. Still alive, still kicking, still paralyzed. Bruce just looks at him silently with regret. The man says, are you just gonna stare at me with that pitying face? I waited so long for this moment. I was scared, but I have nothing left to lose. I didn't deserve this. You made me quadriplegic. I was just a junkie. All I wanted was her pearl necklace. But your father reacted, and I shot. Bruce immediately sees red and says, what? The man says, I was afraid to confess. Now, you'll think of me as often as I think of you, every night until the end of your life. We then see Bruce's fist shaking in anger. Alfred says, Master Bruce, let's go. And he has to pull him out of there so as to prevent the very outburst that he was talking about. We then see Bruce as he's being driven around in the back of his car, thinking about whether or not he was right to beat that man in the first place, based on that confession, saying he could be lying to get back at me, but he knew about the pearl necklace. So I was right. He is my parents' killer. I left him paralyzed. We see a little ... and he says, but breathing. Up in the driver's seat, Alfred says, Master Bruce, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I also had to deal with the trauma that you went through. I'm angry too, but I see you sinking deeper and deeper into this gothic fantasy that you created to overcome your own pain. I thought I could bring you back to reality by taking you to see him. To which Bruce just says, shut up, Alfred. They then drive past the protest, and Nia actually comes running up to the car, asking, Mr. Wayne, we need your position on, and then he interrupts her and says, I'm not going to validate your speech, brat, and then they drive off. Alfred says, you just validated it, sir. Someone at the protest says, did you record that? Nia says, yeah. At the study where the murder happened, Jim Gordon and Batman look over the scene. Batman determines that the scene has been messed with, tampered with, evidence removed when it shouldn't have been. He says, there are police involved with these crimes. No one can be trusted. And then out from under the floorboards, he pulls out a little tiny silver pin. Gordon then continues down the list of potential victims for this serial killer, people that were on the patients list of the Arkham Asylum Children's Ward. And in this next department, we actually find the preacher from the church who invites Gordon in. Gordon then tells him that he's investigating these murders and that he's on the potential list list of victims, and then points out it's weird that his age doesn't match all the other victims, right? He's much, much older than Bruce Wayne is, so how he could have been on the children's list is very bizarre. The preacher then says, "Listen, son, I have no idea what you're talking about." And Jim's like, "Oh, this is weird. There is no other Vincent Strasburg III in Gotham City." The preacher then walks away to his bathroom. "This conversation is making my migraine worse. I need a painkiller." And as he's doing that and leaves Jim Gordon standing in his living room, he notices a jar full of bugs. But not only that, sitting behind it, there's a little book with the exact same shape of the silver pin that Batman found on the crime scene. I also didn't mention this before, but while Krytoon was being interrogated by Jim, he drew this little symbol with his own blood, and we didn't really know what it meant at first, but Bruce has been looking into it, and he's actually up behind a sign of a building, and we see a little side-by-side of the shape that Krytoon drew, with the face of a clock on the clock tower, with the hands matching the inside of the upside-down triangle exactly, meaning that whatever is going on here has something to do with what's inside this clock tower, also known as Hotel Townsend. Bruce then heads over there, sees a lot of armed men on the roof, and gets ready to plunge down and fight them. Jim Gordon, back at the apartment, pulls out his firearm, assuming that he's dealing with a suspect in this case. Before realizing that a moth has landed on his glasses, he freaks out, shoos it away. Before we see a ton of them, Gordon says, "Father?" He then turns into the kitchen, where someone says, "Father?" No. A bunch of moths fly out at him, and we see this weird, demonic-looking creature in a cloth, kind of resembling a moth, with huge, like, claws, talons, whatever you want to call him. He then attacks Gordon, knocking the glasses off his face. It says, "Call me Mother, my son." So whatever these serial killings are, this preacher has something to do with it, and he has some sort of split identity between himself as a father and his true self as Mother. We then cut back to Batman on the roof, fighting the armed guards, saying, "They're armed, but I know their type. Depending on how I present myself, I'm either a monster or just a loser in a bat costume. I choose loser. Instead of striking terror, I encourage them to show off. They make me bulletproof." And we see just how easily he's still able to take them on after they're all crowding him. In the back of a GCPD van, we see Krytoon being hauled off to prison as the cops are sitting there mocking him, making fun of his appearance, his whole getup, his whole motivation. But what they don't know is that he's cracking his wrists out of shape and manually scraping the handcuffs off while it's cutting his hand open just so he can get free. We then hear a sharp sound from outside the van and get this really striking, disturbing panel of Krytoon free as a bird in the back of a van with his forearm shoved down the mouth and throat of this officer, holding the gun at the cop in the passenger side of the car before shooting him directly in the head. The other cop at the wheel freaks out, steers it off the road, and ends up flipping the van with all of them in it. We jump back to Mother as he's attacking Jim Gordon, holding him up off the ground by his throat with this gigantic hand before being stabbed multiple times through the chest and stomach by someone else. But not just anyone, it's the red hooded woman from the church. And as he's dying, Mothra says, "Oh my dear, you've always been my favorite, but you're not capable of stopping the bells." And then he jumps straight out the window, breaking the glass. Jim holds his gun up at the girl, says, "Freeze." And just like that, she gets down on her knees, puts her hands behind her head, saying nothing, just giving in, with moths still flying around the apartment. We jump back to Batman, who's still fighting off the guys, and ends up being pushed through the glass of the clock, descending all the way down onto the floor inside the hotel below. Someone off panel says, "Finally," and he looks up to see all these masked, robed people with the exact same pin shape on their faces. Someone in a throne says, "A demon cub falls to the earth and breaks its wing. It becomes the devil and kills the man." And we get a closer look at this guy saying, "Welcome home, child." We don't know what the hell any of this is, but this is very clearly way bigger than Batman ever thought it could be. There is something else going on, something systemic. There's like a whole cult here. The whole city is in chaos. There's so much happening, and I'm really excited to see what happens in the next one. So that is it for this issue. If you want me to cover issue 3, let me know in the comments down below. That is the video. Thank you for watching.